Welcome to Vision Pros, the show all about spatial computing, visionOS, and getting work done on the Apple Vision Pro. I'm Tim Chen, host of the show.
One thing that I've observed everywhere that I've worked, including Apple, including startups or just smaller teams, there's always an angle of, this is going to be a long answer, but there's always an angle where the designers on the team are having to convince the developers on the team or the engineers or whoever that something should look a certain way or change, right? Very normal. You got to convince people. But the weird phenomenon for me that inspired DetailsPro is the amount of gatekeeping that would come from developers. So, and I mean like specific, really weird factual gatekeeping, like saying, a button can't look like that. And I remember, just as much as I love design, I'm always like trying to advocate for the designers in the situation. So long story short, coming back to DetailsPro, I'm really just trying to arm people with the actual user interface software development kit. Like, here are the pieces. These are the actual pieces, and you can combine them and recombine them. So if you show somebody a design that you made in DetailsPro, no one can say that it can't look that way because you already made it work in the system.
Welcome to another episode of Vision Pros. I'm pleased to be joined by Sahand, the developer behind DetailsPro in this episode. DetailsPro is a phenomenal app that lets you design a SwiftUI interface all in a GUI and then export that code to use in Xcode and Playgrounds and use however you will. In this episode, we deep dive into that app as well as talk about his background working at Apple, his experience with headsets, including the Apple Vision Pro, and have a couple of fun tangents along the way. As a reminder, you can support this podcast over visionpros.fm/Patreon or by subscribing in Apple Podcasts. My great thanks to everyone that supports the show. By financially supporting the show, you'll get episodes early to both Vision Pros and iPad Pros. And also, if you have not yet left a review in Apple Podcasts, every review goes a long way in helping make this show more discoverable, letting others find the show. So if you have not yet left a review, I'd really appreciate just a minute of your time to do just that as you're listening today. With that, here's my discussion with Sahand all about DetailsPro. Welcome to the podcast, Sahand.
Thank you, Tim. Good to be here.
Great to have you on. Your app caught my eye as I was browsing the visionOS App Store, which it does have updates with new apps from time to time, and your app, yes. DetailsPro, was one of them, and we'll be talking about it in a bit here.
Mm-hmm.
So before we dive into all of that, can you share a bit on your background?
Yeah. So I started off, I feel like all this stuff for me started as a graphic designer, as back in the high school days.
Mm-hmm.
And I got into making websites. And when Swift came out, I got into iOS. So that kind of marks a certain, chapter of when I was able to keep up with the iOS development world. For a long time, I made just a bunch of random stuff. And then I got out of college, worked at Condé Nast in New York doing web development,
mm-hmm.
and was still making those apps in the background. And then I worked at Apple for a couple of years, which was sort of like the crescendo of all of that.
Sure.
And but yeah, so I've basically always been doing development for the sake of design, and I just love design more than development, but I also love development.
Yeah, design feels like it's a fun challenge of like both beauty and like purpose and like this immersion of art and function,
Totally, especially in the Apple context where it's the standard is as high as it gets, I feel like.
Yeah, for sure. At Apple, are you able to share what your role was when you were there?
Yeah, I had I did two roles. First role was I was supporting App Store like operations, mm-hmm. working on apps, like internal apps for that. So I was a developer. I was a Mac software developer. And then my second role, I was an iOS, Mac OS, sort of all the platforms, design prototyper. And that was in the media products group. So it was anything App Store, music, TV, books, podcasts. But I basically got to shift into more of a design focused role, which was really nice.
And prototyping, that's like the early phases where you get to play around more, which sounds
mm-hmm.
like a lot of fun, right?
Totally. Yeah, you are at a very high level. You're less concerned with bugs that are actually affecting people, and you're more concerned with ideas in the earlier stages.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. The music app, man, that it used to be the iPod app back in the day. It's had quite the transformation over the years.
Dude, 100%. Yeah, and recently I've been loving all the for me the biggest thing I feel like I've noticed recently is all the animations, all the animated album art and everything.
Yeah, definitely. That's music app. It's in the visionOS app. I really enjoy the music app there. It could be better, of course. Like I would love on visionOS if the music team had fun with the visualizer back. We used to have the visualizer as like a core thing, the equalizer, whatever.
Yes.
I remember back in the day, you just like put your Mac monitor and you just have that going as you're zoning out to Daft Punk or something. And imagine a roof scale like visualizer where you have some kind of, I don't know, something. You have the meditation app where they're going
totally
wild, like. Yeah, that could be fun.
Do you remember iTunes LPs?
Yes. Oh,
that was the other thing.
That's like the iTunes extras, but for music. Yeah.
I remember Muse had an iTunes LP, and I would just like run home from school and just look at that I think it was like a menu maybe, and I don't know if there was anything interactive, but it was just gorgeous to look at.
Yeah. And that was in the days where iTunes extras, it was a download where you download the extra. And I remember you could open that up as like a zip file almost and extract the videos. So back in the day, I could like sync offline these extras to my iPod, whatever, Nano or iPad, original iPad, and just the video files. So, which was great because like nowadays you have to be online to access that stuff. So, yeah. And then, Apple Music Classical, they have the booklets now, which is pretty cool.
I got to check that out. I've listened a little bit, but I haven't gone back to it yet.
Yeah.
The booklets what is that?
I think it's just scans of the actual like album books. So like when you buy a CD, it's got the liner notes and all that stuff. I think it's just scans of those, which that's super rad because I always loved, buying the soundtracks and reading, Jeff Bond's like write up of, the history of this score and stuff. So it'd be cool if that expanded just to all albums versus just classical, which is weird.
Totally.
So, a lot of tangents I could see happening today. I'll try to keep us focused as much as I want to, I guess. But let's have Apple Vision Pro, I guess. What's your personal experience with other headsets, if any, and then the Vision Pro itself?
My experience, I had a Quest 1, and I was a pretty big promoter for the Quest because I got it over the pandemic, and I was totally sold on using it for a game called Racket NX, playing like
it's like tennis type stuff.
Yeah, it's like it's like squash. It's like gym squash where you're bouncing. And then I would play. One of my buddies had one, and we would do mini golf together. And I felt 100% immersed with my friend.
Walkabout mini golf is an amazing experience.
I wonder. Yeah.
Are
you saying is that the style or the name?
That's the name of the game. That's the one you're probably thinking of. It's on PSVR 2, which is where I have my experience with it. But it's a shame that should be on visionOS, Walkabout Mini Golf, because that's such a good social game where it's a hangout game. Like it's fun. The courses are fun. It's wacky courses, but it's mainly just a good avenue to chat with your friends.
Totally. So basically, I'd use the Quest and then really nothing else. And then when the Vision Pro was announced, I was totally I was someone who was like mind blown.
Yeah.
Couldn't wait to get one. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. Yeah. The Vision Pro, when that was announced, going into it, it's like, I'm not going to be interested because Apple doesn't get gaming. And then they showed me, this is the headset for everything but games.
Dude, it totally, I feel like for any amount of game, criticism or potential, there's always they're twice as good at movies, right? And the other entertainment verticals are amazing.
Yeah, because that my PSVR 2, I did the thing before Apple Vision Pro came out. It's like, oh, let me watch Foundation. I watched all of season 2 Foundation on my PSVR 2 downstairs in the basement at my gaming desk or whatever. And not that I don't have a comfy chair, but it was worth it for that experience of the big screen and all that. But it hits home again how much better Apple is at this. Throughout the hour session, I'd have to recenter myself because it would slowly drift or whatever, and it's just it's not as good. There's the Apple TV app, which is great. It's on PlayStation to do that, but yeah, Apple Vision Pro, it's paid for itself just in like, I'm not in control of the TV in our house, so we have a crappy one. So I could at least have this experience,
Yeah. But yeah, so I just I was gonna say the other thing. My initial impression, I remember, besides being really impressed, I was pretty mind blown just at the fact that there were full apps. I think that's a good comparison for thinking back to like what I thought about the Quest, because they showed like Keynote, I think, in the initial thing. So that's pretty. It was pretty impressive that all these apps that we're used to looked basically 100% functional. With no features missing. I'm sure there's if you dive really deep, there's something, but that was the other thing that I was like, whoa, this is going to be crazy.
Yeah, that was the other thing that stuck out with me as well. It's like, oh, this is a spatial computer, and actually, it hit to me. It hit to me that I do a lot of work on the iPad. It's like, oh, if I can get work done on the iPad, this is so much better because more screen space to work with. I can surround myself with windows. I love working, especially with Vision Pro, with a swivel chair and just like turning around and, there's that window I'm working on and I can just kind of forget about it for a bit. And then when I need it, I can look back over to it. And yeah, the whole just like, oh, this is a computer, that really works for me. I know it doesn't work for everyone, but I'm already there where this is like the perfect form factor for a computer for me.
Whoa. What's your preferred text input?
I have a headless MacBook Air.
Wow.
I bought a M1 MacBook Air on eBay for $300, a broken one. Screen was busted, and I removed the screen, and that is the best. That's the best way to interact with Vision Pro as far as text and trackpad and all that.
Impressive. That always sounds so much simpler than I imagine. Like that, because you're not the first person I've heard of with a headless MacBook.
Yeah, I mean, Fatici, of course, spearheaded this whole concept, and it's like,
the MacPad.
Yeah, the MacPad, and it's like, and I do have magnets if I want to mount the iPad to it, and I bought the M4 iPad Pro, and I didn't get the Magic Keyboard this time because I'll just use this if I need a keyboard. I'll universal control over to it. So
yeah.
But it's such a cool experience with the Vision Pro. It's best there, with it connecting and finding things. I just wish there was a better way to tell my Mac I'm asleep and don't ignore these keys while I'm in the bag.
Yeah.
That's the biggest pain point for that experience.
Yeah.
But that's. Do you have a favorite input? Just a Bluetooth keyboard?
Yeah, I guess Bluetooth keyboard. I was gonna say if that's the thing that I think prevents me from using the Vision Pro as often as I want to use it is I wish so. Yeah, just text input being a little bit easier would I think drastically improve my or increase the amount of time I spend on it.
Yeah, because without it, oh man, it's like let me spend half hour trying to write this text message.
Totally, and I'm so confident they can do it too. I feel like this is one of those things where we'll talk about it now, and then in a couple of years we'll forget that it was even a thing. That oh, remember when it wasn't that easy to enter stuff? But most of the time I'm on the Vision Pro because I want to, especially when I'm doing some work. I'm like something that I want to be immersed in. Certain things, it's just really nice to have a huge screen. Like I do a lot of photo editing, and I can focus so clearly with an environment. And I've usually got my Mac piped in. So in that case, I'm good. But if it's something like I'm hanging out and then I just start typing an email or something, no Bluetooth keyboard.
Right.
That's the trigger where I normally have to take it off, and I'm always bummed. But yeah, so I would love just like more it sounds so generic, but like more magical hand text input,
Yeah, I know there's been researchers that have figured out like just typing on tables in front of you as a thing. So I don't know what, I'm sure Apple hasn't figured that one out yet, but yeah, they've got to figure this out because otherwise, it really does. An input is terrible without a keyboard of some sort. And I would love for them to sell like a slab like I have of just trackpad and keyboard as one thing you turn on and off, and it pairs as one. So it's like, yeah. Touch ID on there. Yeah.
Be the dream.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as far as the Vision Pro, do you have any favorite apps to just as you're working and getting stuff done in the Vision Pro? What kind of apps do you enjoy so far?
I feel like it's mostly stock, I guess, at this point. I mean, I use my hands down my favorite thing on Vision Pro is the Apple TV and cinema mode. And I think that's something, and just to kind of something that is design related to when I first saw the controls for placing yourself in the theater, like front, middle, or balcony and floor. I think is that what they're called?
Yeah.
I just remember going like, oh my God, that's the most genius thing ever, to boil them down to such like human terms and things they're familiar with. So for me, I think that's what I use all the time. I'm sort of big on freeform, but I've actually gotten a lot bigger on Notes recently.
Interesting.
Notes, I feel like, is with all the stuff they've added with like, you can throw a bunch of images into a note and make them all small thumbnails. And there's just a few usability things where I sort of stopped using Notion as much and switched back to Notes. And you can't beat the fact that they're just on every device.
Yeah.
It's like so clean.
The Vision Pro app for Notes is pretty decent, I would say. It's one of their better, I'd say it's one of their better ones. The one that it takes advantage of the space really nicely. Spreads out nice and wide if you want it to be a nice big window. Yeah.
But so basically very stock. I wish there was a fun third-party app that I used a lot, but there isn't one that comes to mind.
Yeah. Yeah, with the TV app, the theater mode, I occasionally try the front row and the back row, but front row feels like I am literally just too close.
Yeah.
Middle seems just about perfect because I can see pretty much the whole screen, and I'll, do balcony or floor depending on the angle of my head or chair or whatever. But
front row is
it's perfect.
Front is if you want to simulate getting there late and there being no seats left.
Yeah. But yeah, I wish there was a way to have it big but not feel like you're as close. But I guess that just whatever, we don't have resolution for that quite yet. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. As far as visionOS and the app ecosystem, do you have any just hopes going forward over this next year and a couple of years?
Okay, well, text entry, definitely something. I think games, we kind of touched on it earlier. That would be my other big hope.
They should partner with Sony, and they could currently Sony does not sell the Sense controllers standalone. You have to buy the whole headset. If you break the Sense controllers, you got to go through Sony as like a war tier repair. It's the wildest thing. That they should partner with Sony, pay Sony a lot of money to build out these Sense controllers that you can also use the Vision Pro and have those used for gaming in that way.
It's interesting because they also, they're pretty cozy now on, you can buy a DualSense controller at the Apple Store.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. And I have a PS5. I recently just tried the, I think it's called Remote Play, but it was actually pretty playable just playing. I had my control through my iPad, playing my PS5 in the other room. Like, all that stuff is great. So it doesn't feel that far off.
Yeah, and the Remote Play is great. And if you plug in via USB-C, you actually get the haptics for Remote Play as well from the DualSense, which is pretty neat.
Wow. Yeah, USB-C to your iPad.
Yeah, I thought it wasn't there, and it actually is there, but only wired. Because that's one of the reasons. I got to get a Portal because the haptics are built in. But yeah.
The other thing I would say for hopes, or it's kind of an interesting backwards reflection, is that I feel like there were actually a lot more apps at launch than I would have expected, and like a lot of them from, if you follow the indie community, like a lot of the developers out there really got their stuff out pretty early. I feel like it was almost, I think most of them, if not all of them, developed those purely on the simulator.
Yeah, like Crouton,
right? Because no one had one.
Yeah,
maybe you had tried one at a lab or something, but so I can't even say like, oh, I wish more of my favorite apps were on there. I think it's I'm personally waiting for more big name stuff, like some crazy sports, NBA courtside, something like that. Because I feel like a lot of the little, quote unquote, little guys are already on there.
Right. Like, where's Netflix and YouTube, for instance? Yeah.
Crazy. Super crazy. YouTube of all, come on.
Yeah, Juno's so nice, but it's slowly starting. I've noticed some videos it'll play, and it's slowly starting to break with some of the videos where it like launches this non-Juno view of just the website. It's like, oh, is it slowly going to break on me?
Something else will look back and be like, can't believe YouTube wasn't on there,
Yep, totally. And yeah, the theater app's great by Sandwich, and they added a Dome theater recently, which lets you watch like 180 video and stuff. I think it'll integrate with YouTube to watch stuff from that as well.
Wow.
But, yeah.
I love them. I know Adam was on your podcast.
Yeah.
I was at the John Gruber talk show, and the work they did with that was amazing.
And they did another live stream of a musician recently, like October 14th. I missed it, and it's not on replay to purchase, which is a bummer because they did another live event in theater, which is cool.
That's super cool.
But yeah, the big names, like it would be nice to have more of those make their way over, even if it's iPad versions. Like, enable your app, please. Like, they work well.
Totally.
Any other just general visionOS thoughts before we dive into Details Pro?
I think overall, my overall impression is just I was really amazed. So, being really honest, like, I'm so impressed by how good I think everything looks. I think there's a lot of thoughts around where headsets are, but just ignoring the physical device or any thoughts, if you just look at what you see when you're in there, the glass and the lights and the reflections and all those, basically, I am still, I feel like they really turned in their homework on that, all of that stuff, window management. So I know we're on another long road of improvement and potential being realized, but I really feel like it was the opposite of vaporware in a lot of ways. It was like, here it is. So yeah, I feel like it's one of the most recent futuristic things that has actually come out, because there's been a lot of products that are announced recently, and like how much they live to their potential is up for debate. But yeah, but visionOS, and maybe honestly, probably hinges a lot on how much it is based on iPadOS, for better or worse. That's a whole nother can of worms. But definitely for the better. I think a lot of the stuff has been really usable.
Yeah.
With Vision.
As far as like things looking natural, when I was talking with Adam, I mentioned to him, hey, it's weird how the TV in Vision Pro is. I got the window behind me. I see the sun coming in from the window on the TV. It's like, yeah, that's a part of like the APIs that so the window, like, developers can take advantage of your actual lighting in your room, which is wild to me.
So wild.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. It's,
yeah,
it's, and yeah, I put it on and it's like, oh, this just everything looks great. I know the cameras can get better and more lifelike, but it does the trick of like, oh, this is my environment I'm in, and yeah, but
and the eye and the hand tracking. I feel like nobody even talks about that anymore, right? That's just sort of assumed now because it's so good,
right? Yeah, you look somewhere, you just tap, and
I have heard some friends and stuff wondering about the scrolling gesture. I don't know how much you've thought about that, whether it's a tiring one.
Yeah, it's not for me. Like, I can
scroll all day, basically. But that would be something I would be open to, that somehow becoming even more sleek. But it's definitely so natural.
You rub your fingers together.
That's something that I've heard, which is crazy.
That'd be hard to track, though. I'd imagine. Like, what's this versus false positives would be a problem, I can imagine.
But like grabbing things, dragging things, windows, color accuracy, all that stuff is so yeah, that's my overall impression, is a lot of wow, a lot of high quality in this product.
One cool thing, I'm not sure if I've mentioned this in the show yet, but it's fun to go in accessibility and turn on grayscale mode in visionOS. You can basically experience what it's like to be colorblind in a way. Like, because pass through will be grayscale when you do this, as well as your windows. It's a wild experience. If you do the quick enable of just grayscale, it just does the windows. But if you go into accessibility in the depths of the settings app, it'll do your pass-through camera as well, which is really cool. And actually kind of helpful at night, I find, just easier to see, a little bit.
Yeah. Do you find it to be like relaxing in the way like e-ink is kind of taking off now?
Sorta. It's to me. It's just it's different. It's just a change of pace. Like, oh, this is just different.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's another thing. The Books app should be really rewritten for visionOS. They could do some cool things there.
That one's just pure iPad right now, right?
Yeah.
I think that's got to be exciting, whatever that is.
That'll be cool when they rewrite that eventually, because that'd be neat. Yeah, to have a fully thought out what's the best reading experience in Vision Pro as far as the gestures to change the page and just a reading experience overall. Could do some cool environments there, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, let's dive into Details Pro before we get too sidetracked with other things. Something cool I noticed about Details Pro is that along Details Pro, when I noticed in the App Store, Shader Vision was also right there next to it, another development app where you're doing actual development work in visionOS. And I just thought that was an interesting just coincidence, right? Or have you noticed a sense in the development community of other developers wanting to build out these tools to make it a place to actually work within visionOS?
I feel like that I'm definitely seeing I think what is a good trend. And I think the interesting thing that maybe visionOS, the reason that visionOS has this gravitational pull is that it's one of the first platforms in Apple history recently where you can only observe its characteristics in the platform itself, right? Like you could design a Mac app-ish looking thing on iOS, but there's just no way to bring out the glass, for example, on Mac there's the simulator, but that has a lot of limitations. So I bet people jump to that a lot sooner with Vision, which is kind of cool too, because making a tool is not easy. Making a tool is like pretty complex. So anyone who is putting a tool together, which you put it out there, you help other people. It's a lot of work, but I feel like Vision is like you have to get up there. You have to get into it to be able to play with it.
Right. And I imagine it's an appealing platform for many developers because the Mac is so tightly integrated where you can have, Details Pro or, Shader Vision up alongside Xcode if you want to.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other tools you hope come to visionOS? Like as a developer, what are some other missing pieces you hope we get, like tools to fill the niche of?
So in my line of work, I do so I make Details Pro. I also develop a line of a little family of apps around Fujifilm cameras with a partner.
Yeah.
And then I do some random web stuff. So I think I think perennial is the right term. Like all the time something that I would love would be to be able to run simple web apps and stuff on Vision Pro. This also exists on iPad. Like you can't really start up a Node app
and on visionOS, you can't even install a web app, period. There's no like share and save to home screen thing.
Totally. So that's something that will always necessitate bringing the Mac into the story, unless Vision Pro ever opened up for that. And then
different browser engines, I'd imagine, would be huge once that eventually opens up.
Yes, I know that'd be interesting.
But still not here. It's here in the EU, sort of on iOS.
Maybe that would be a way. But the other thing, so the only other thing I would say, I guess, that I would hope to see is an expansion of tools that I use to make native apps. So like Xcode is only on Mac for a lot of good reasons. But besides that, there's Swift Playgrounds and, Swift Playgrounds 4, which was a big leap. And I have support for that in Details Pro. But that would be kind of the dream. I think there's a lot of people who, develop an app on their Mac and go, this is great. And then they look at their iPad and they go, my iPad is great. And I just bought the M4 iPad. If I could develop an app on here, I would right now. And there's some historical baggage there, I'm sure. And there's security concerns. There's a whole bunch of things. But I know a lot of people, just to put it in a different perspective, for Details Pro, there's always a ton of usage on the iPhone. And whenever I tell some friends or mentors that, they always go like, are people actually designing on an iPhone? Like, there's no way. But actually, of course they are, because they do everything else on their iPhone.
Right.
It's like those barriers are kind of gone now.
Yeah, with the iPad, you get the Playgrounds app, which you can actually, and it's integrated as well with Details Pros we'll talk about, but it just seems so limited as far as its potential right now. And hopefully, 10 years from now, we'll look back at it, it'll be kind of like an Xcode Lite versus what it is now.
Yeah, totally. I think a lot of people would love that, and they're kind of lined up ready to go to make apps on their devices.
Yeah, it's so weird, the limitations. Like, Apple's big push is subscriptions, and you can't even set up subscriptions in the app, which is like that's what they want every developer to do to monetize. It seems to me right now.
Yeah. A funny thing for me, and I know there's a lot of really hardworking people that are working on all of this, so I'm sure they're very aware, but the limitation for me as someone who maintains apps that are existing, that's a bummer, is there's no way to just open up your app that you've worked on for a few years already in Xcode in Swift Playgrounds 4. You have to, start there. And I think an interesting symptom of this situation is that I often will have some quick idea and I really want to just throw it into the app. But I'll be on my iPad or my iPhone. I will actually go to the github.com website or the GitHub app and hit edit file, and with no assistance, in just a plain text window, like type in the change and save it to a new branch. Like, it's so not modern or helpful. It's like the worst possible way to do it. But there's other tools, like Working Copy is a great app for local Git stuff. But anyway, needless to say, it would be awesome to be able to commit Swift code to your projects.
For sure.
From an Apple sanctioned app.
Yeah. So, Details Pro, what is kind of like the elevator pitch? Like, for those that don't know about this app, what is it?
So the elevator pitch for Details Pro is it's an app where you can really quickly create SwiftUI designs that are totally real, and they require no code. So basically, there is a really friendly interface for creating a SwiftUI design, which could be a whole screen, it could be a small card, it could be anything that would go into an app. And the emphasis is really on friendliness and approachability for the designer.
And it's designed as an app. Like, you don't need to be a developer to actually use this app. Is that
exactly
part of the design process? Yeah.
That was what the genesis was, which I'll tell you more about. But yeah, basically you don't need to know how code works. If you're someone who works somewhere and your team has an app or something, and you want to be able to say, I think for me that the goal is always to enable people to work quietly and focus and like refine an idea. So you'd be able to open up Details Pro and say, I think our so-and-so page in our app needs to look different. And you'd be able to punch it together super simply. There's a bunch of examples. It's just a very safe app where you can undo your changes and really get messy, but it's always okay.
Gotcha. Yeah. And it originally launched on iOS and iPadOS, or was the Mac part of that original launch?
I know. I'm pretty sure it was iOS and iPadOS in 2020, 1 year after SwiftUI was out. Okay.
And yeah, and I saw examples of like the iOS 14 lock screen. So
yeah,
that was something that it wasn't out when iOS 14 was out.
Yeah, no, it was.
2020. It's already 2024. Yeah. Wow. Never mind.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say, and I think was iOS 14 introduced widgets, I'm pretty sure.
Right. Yeah.
I think 13 introduced dark mode was a big thing. So that summer of iOS 14 with widgets and SwiftUI coming out a year earlier, that was, I feel like, a really big boom year for Apple design, because widgets just looked, that was a totally new
for
language.
Sure. And that's another thing you can't do in Playgrounds and any kind of widgets. Yeah.
It's interesting. There's got to be some updates, something to that. I really do like, one thing I like about Swift Playgrounds 4, maybe you've seen it, their take on app icons is really charming. Have you seen how you like pick the app icon in that?
I haven't, no.
There's basically, instead of having to pick like an SF symbol or an emoji, they just have a lot of kind of like hand-painted looking icon categories that are nice. But but yeah, so Details Pro. Well, if I can add one thing that I think is an important detail here is that SwiftUI, if anyone is unfamiliar, is a totally new way of developing an app where you express what you want to see on screen. And it's just super dense and compact. Like it's amazing. You'd be
Yeah.
surprised. Like something that you think looks really pretty on iOS, it might be like 10 lines of SwiftUI. It might be like five. So
And what I've
that,
heard
yeah.
is on Intel Macs, it would grind those machines to a halt trying to develop SwiftUI. Is that
Wow.
right?
I a lot of things feel slower. So I don't remember. I must have done some SwiftUI stuff on an Intel Mac before I got the M1,
Yeah.
but the M1 made everything feel slow in a way. So I don't.
Right.
That's interesting. Maybe there's not. Yeah, the optimizations aren't the
It's been a
same.
while since we've used Intel Macs at this point, but
Yeah,
yeah. And then, so the original app for iOS and iPadOS was the idea you're designing for those platforms on those platforms kind of thing?
100%.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is since SwiftUI is different from like Photoshop or Sketch or Figma, where you are arranging pixels or vectors to look like something, because SwiftUI, when you design a Details Pro, it's actually alive. So a really simple thing to observe is if you just put text down in your design and you flip your iPad to dark mode, it flips to dark mode. Like there's nothing I'm doing to make that happen. That's just how text works. So you get to kind of have all those natural behaviors of the platform.
Gotcha.
Kind
And
of like a
then
shortcut.
something I'm curious about is, say, you have an existing project where you designed with iPad in mind, and then say you want to make a visionOS version of that app. Is the place to start is you duplicate that project, and then what's like the conversion process of like, oh, this element's very iPad-y, let me make this, because I know SwiftUI is supposed to like scale up and down, but I
Yeah.
know visionOS also has its own peculiarities to it.
That's a great question. So, I mean, I did this myself with making the Vision OS version of Details Pro. So, Details Pro is a 100% SwiftUI app. You know, it's not like using the old system. It's interesting. So, yeah, I would definitely take. Let's say you had a design for some awesome screen that was for iPhone or iPad. You would duplicate it, but either way, you could just open the nice thing about Details Pro is you can open any of your designs in the Vision OS app for free. You don't have to pay any money, you know, at that point. And you will just observe your designs rendered natively in Vision OS.
Okay.
So you'll already just kind of see things translate. But there's definitely a lot of stuff you got to do. Like one thing that I really didn't notice until I started designing something for Vision OS is how much text is just white basically everywhere. Like there's not a lot of it's a lot more like, because Vision OS is basically always in dark mode in a way, or I don't know what the system returns if you ask what color scheme you're in, but there's you don't have the same, you know, it's mostly glass and then there's tinted glass, but I just had a bunch of buttons in my app that were like red for danger or blue for interactive. They basically all turned white. So I think what you would do is you would duplicate your file and then you would start to change anything that just doesn't look right in Vision, which kind of all those things pop out as eyesores as soon as you try to look at it, you know?
Right. Yeah. Now, as you were saying those things, it immediately popped in my head. Was Details Pro designed in Details Pro?
That's a great. It's so funny. It wasn't initially, but it is now, and I
Right.
think
Yeah. Because
it was
initially you had to
initially
build it first, but now that's here for the
yeah.
updates. Yeah. Do you have a version of
Now
Details Pro with a Details Pro?
it's a lot. Totally, it's a lot more Details Pro and Details Pro now. Which and this just saying the name Details Pro that many times makes me
Right.
want to share with you a great tweet that I got once, which was I think it was just simply great app, comma, terrible name. And I remember thinking like, okay, you know, I can appreciate that. Like you got me there. And naming is a very personal process for everyone. Um, Details Pro felt right for me. It was what I wanted to, you know, put out there, something where you're focused on details and it's a little bit more professional. You know, it felt right aesthetically, but yeah, saying Details Pro, I know a lot of people don't like the name, but but some people do.
Yeah. Are people upset like design isn't in the name somewhere because you're designing apps? Is what their main holdup is?
Yeah, I think that's one thing, and there's also it's an interesting. So I feel like I'm always making the. If I can go back, just I would think I would add is, um, one thing that I've observed everywhere that I've worked, including Apple, including startups or just smaller teams, there's always an angle of this is going to be a long answer, but there's always an angle where the designers on the team are having to convince the developers on the team or the engineers or whoever that something should look a certain way or change, right? Very normal. You got to convince people. But the weird phenomenon for me that inspired Details Pro is the amount of gatekeeping that would come from developers. So, and I mean like specific, really, really weird factual gatekeeping, like saying, a button can't look like that, or that can't look that way. And I remember just as much as I love design, I'm always like trying to advocate for the designers in the situation. So long story short, coming back to Details Pro, I'm really just trying to arm people with the actual user interface software development kit. Like, here are the pieces. These are the actual pieces, and you can combine them and recombine them. So if you show somebody a design that you made in Details Pro, no one can say that it can't look that way because you already made it work in the system.
Yeah, so a developer can't try to talk down to you in some way as a designer.
Totally. The code is right there, and they already were playing in the limits of the sandbox. So, yeah.
I'm curious, within 10 years, do you think there would be a way to have a companion app to Details Pro to write the actual logic that makes the UI and design of Details Pro work? Like, is there a future
like
where,
fully.
Fully, where you could write an app from start to finish without being a developer in some way?
I have a couple. So I'm sure that'll be possible simply with all the AI, all the stuff that's coming out recently.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't think that I would be able to deliver that with Details Pro. I think the amount of minutia you have to be concerned with when you have a real production app and there's like some bug. Basically, there's a lot of things to articulate, and I can't imagine a way that it would be better than either the actual code or I guess some structures maybe. Like, so maybe there'd be something new. There are some visual languages like Scratch. I don't know if you've heard of Scratch. That's a popular college learning tool.
Yeah.
But I think
like basically if there's a play button in this app, have logic tied into that where this means, it's play and pause and all that stuff. Yeah.
Totally. There's one other app that's an alternative to Details Pro and other design tools that's called Play, and I'm not sure. I don't think they have a visionOS version, or I know their Mac, iPhone, iPad situation is a different take than what Details Pro is, but from what I've seen, I know they have a lot of that kind of stuff where like you can have a button and you can have a state variable for that button and it does whatever. But it's just crazy. The amount of stuff that you have to do for a real app is just so complex that I feel like maybe these design tools, you could use them to create your first version, but then at some point you have to pop the hood and do something really weird.
There's a difference between like a demo app and like a real a real app, that's going to be built out. Yeah. So something they're pretty cool I noticed is the community area in Details Pro, where you can load up designs as inspiration or a starting point. And there's a couple different sections. Do you see visionOS getting its own section one day?
Oh, 100%. I'm right now. That's one thing I'm working on for the holiday update is just a bunch of visionOS templates. I'm kind of redoing the way that all the templates are in there. But yeah, it's visionOS. There's so many. I think there's two big things that I think are the trademark things for people to work with. One is Glass. It's super fun designing with. I mean, it's for anyone who's not a developer or hasn't tried designing with SwiftUI yet. Apple has made it super easy. Basically, you can make any little stack of elements. Let's say you do like a little profile thing that's like a profile avatar title, there's someone's name and their title. and you can just say give that a glass background, and it'll just create that around whatever shape object you had, and you can give it, there's different tints for being like a little darker or a little lighter, but that's something that I feel like people will want to noodle around with. The other thing are the ornaments. That I think it was a stunning design move, and so I personally am right now working on different templates that I'm just going to put in there that'll be free, that are just starting points, to like give you something to work with, because you'll design your first ornament and you'll go, oh, that's way too many items, or oh, should I mix text in here and whatever. And like the music app, that whole play bar is an ornament on the bottom. That's one of the more meaty ornaments, and then tab views are ornaments on the left. And but yeah, so I definitely need its own section because it's got its own flavors.
And then, so in visionOS, when you look at something, it reacts to it. Like if you look at an icon, it may reveal the name of that as well. In DetailsPro, is there a way to like design something where has both of those states kind of included in the SwiftUI code, or how's that part work?
That's a great question. You can so things like hovering effects and everything. When you, for example, if you put a button down in DetailsPro, the looking at it will cause it to have that hover highlight. I think the interesting thing is a lot of that stuff is, a lot of people probably know, like where you look in a visionOS app is private. Like there's no way to make your app detect that. So you kind of so DetailsPro, anything that has a built-in behavior like a button or an icon exhibits that because it's just live. But there's nothing on top of that.
Okay, gotcha. And then as far as DetailsPro itself, the visionOS version of the app, can you go into like what you've done to make it a true visionOS app? Like what are the kind of design things you did within your own app to make it something on this platform?
So besides the kind of fun stuff I was saying with like all text is basically white and there's glass and stuff, the biggest thing was multi-windows. Multi-window support is something that has existed on iPad for a long time, and I was very lazy as a developer and didn't implement it. And then it was a must-have for Vision. So now my iPad app supports multi-windows. And it's not very difficult to implement. You just have to make sure your app is aware that the same file might be open twice and things like that. That's one thing. And then I think the other thing was spacing out a lot of the interface elements. So it's interesting how I feel like the eye control, eye detection is pretty good at getting small targets. Speaking of Juno, one thing I remember very early on, going on to youtube.com on Safari on Vision Pro, trying to hit the full screen button is almost impossible. Have you ever realized that? So that's something, and I think I'm sure the WebKit Safari teams have done the best they could. Like that's just coming down to it's so small.
Yeah, you have to put the window like front center vision and just like that. That's all.
Laser beam it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Totally. And I'm sure one day a YouTube app, there's another call for that. But so in DetailsPro, I had some areas. I think one thing that I've always tried to do is keep the UI in DetailsPro so simple, and a very concrete way that materializes is I'll try not to invent different interface controls. For example, if something should just be a vertical list, if something is some options, 100% chance I'm just going to put it in a list with a check mark, because I feel like as soon as you get into something custom, it could be better for someone who knows what they're doing, but it could also be confusing for someone who's never seen that before or whatever. But I had some areas of my app that were just a little bit too cute with some small pieces here and there. So that was the other thing. A lot of things had to be spaced out. There's also much fewer divider lines. That's a very specific thing, but my iPad app has divider lines everywhere. The Vision one, dividers are all gone.
Yeah. When do you decide to do a sidebar versus a new window? Like what's that divider?
That's okay. Well,
or an ornament, because ornaments are they are new windows, but they're related to the original windows. So like, yeah, what's that kind of thing?
Ornaments are actually not ornaments are those little strips that are already attached to the window.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but it's funny. One thing that I haven't actually used in Details Pro, but that like slide out panel style window.
Mhm.
Where do you see that? You can see it maybe in messages if you go to like attachments or something.
Right. Yeah. Where it expands that window further, and notes, I think, maybe.
Totally. So I haven't done anything with that. But in terms of like doing a separate window or doing the panels and the things, and you know what? One thing that I learned, I remember when I was first trying to make a visionOS app, the first thing I tried to do was for fun, just for learning design. I tried to mock up a photo editor, and this came back to Details Pro too. But long story short, at first I thought, okay, I'll do this gorgeous photo editing app, and it was all going to be fake. Nothing was going to be operational, but it was just going to be like, how cool can I make this look? And there was a photo in the middle, and then there was going to be tools on the left in a separate window, and then a gallery of other photos in this other window. And you immediately realize that different windows is so confusing and not ergonomic, because you want to be able to grab them and move them all together. So I feel like most of the time you just do it in one window with inspectors that appear or that fancy slide out panel.
And then I noticed you can add notes to your project. Are those just for internal use in Details Pro, or do those show up anywhere in the export process?
Wow, that's actually a great question. I've never thought about putting them in the export, but they should totally be like a comment at the bottom of the file or something. They're just in right now. Yeah, right now that's actually super cool. I'll totally implement that and credit the Vision Pros podcast.
Excellent, thank you.
Those are there mainly because I just wanted a way to capture notes that I was getting when doing a design review with someone. Mm-hmm. So you can just throw the notes right on the file, and then they show up. Any files that have notes show up in a special row on the first page with just your notes. And actually, in the next update that I haven't released yet, I switched them to looking much more like Post-its.
Gotcha. Nice.
Which feels very much like an Apple move, but
yeah,
they're yellow and they've got kind of a darker font and everything. But yeah, just meant to be a little bit kind of a built-in quick review pad.
Yeah. Yeah, I so wonder if Steve Jobs were alive, how much more whimsy he would try to put in some like the mail app if it would have like bigger envelopes that get shot off places. Like
totally, probably a lot, because whimsy I feel like is
he loved
whimsy
that stuff.
and relatability. I feel like they go together.
Yeah, totally. So something we talked about earlier is that you can export your design as a Swift Playground project or even a Swift Playgrounds for app. Now, I'd imagine this stuff, I think Swift Playgrounds will run on visionOS, but the app thing is that iPad OS only?
Yeah, you can export as from Mac. So Details Pro is on iPhone, iPad, Mac, and Vision. And right now you can export a file as a Swift file, just a Swift code, or you can do a Swift Playground, which is kind of a less talked about now format. That was like a mini project, not even a mini project. It's like a sketchpad within an Xcode project, or a Swift Playgrounds 4 app, which I haven't. It's funny. I implemented that when Swift Playgrounds 4 came out, and I haven't really enhanced it in any way. And so I'm sure if there's someone who loves Swift Playgrounds 4, I'd get some feedback about it, and I'd enhance that.
That's an interesting one, because you're designing the UI. So when you export this as an app, it's like half there.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. No, all you get is a static view of your thing.
Okay, gotcha.
But the other thing,
because going the playgrounds, you could actually add the logic into the UI then at that point.
Yeah, in the playground, and the other thing that's also in a upcoming update, I got some feedback just asking to be able to create a whole Xcode project from a single file, meaning like just a new project with that single file in it, which makes sense, because I guess you're like, I already did this, like let's just roll with this. But I don't know if anyone who's checked out Xcode recently, they've done a lot of reorganization, and there's so many different ways to templatize and start your Xcode project. Um, but yeah, but I think the thing that the version of this that we're talking about that's my favorite is if you're on any element, you can just export that element as the code. Because
Oh,
that I
that's
do that
cool.
all the time, where
Yeah.
I'll just like noodle on one small piece and I'll just throw it into something I'm working on.
Yeah. Now, is there a way in Details Pro to have the app flow in there? Like you can add all these different pages,
Hmm.
but there's no way to tell if in the project or something like this screen goes into that one, or is there any kind of relational thing you can build out in here?
There is only as of a few months ago.
Okay.
So that was the biggest piece of that was the biggest request I've always gotten, and so you can now in the latest update, it requires the premium version, so you
Mhm.
can either do a 3-day trial or it's relatively inexpensive. But you can do the navigation, so you can have like the standard navigation on any platform, so you can tap a button and it slides over, or and you can chain different screens, or you can do sheets like the temporary sheets that pop up. And it's funny that the main reason I had sort of an epiphany, I hadn't put those in initially because I remember thinking, the primitives that people want to design with are rectangles and squares and uh, circles and text and images and symbols. But I think a few years later, I realized actually people are very well versed in the different interaction styles, and those are the primitives. And SwiftUI had advanced a little bit by then, so it was a little bit easier for me to put that all together into a tool.
Gotcha. And then beyond sharing the actual code, you can also just share an image of the project.
Hmm.
Is that similar to the Playgrounds app where it's kind of here's just what it looks like, these different screens as an export?
Yeah, it's just like if you need a thumbnail, and that's something that on the topic of, or that's some yeah. So you could just get an image of your design, and that's where Details Pro starts to get kind of hairy for me development wise, because it's not the most essential. Apple doesn't support it that well. Like there's not really a reason that you need to generate images of different parts of your app. So if something is ever going to break in the future, it's going to be that. That's a lot of weird code in there to make that happen.
Yeah, it seems like a weirder one. I guess it's helpful in sharing it with like on the conceptual stage. Share here, developer. Here's what I'm working on. Here's what it looks like, and yeah.
Totally.
And then, so I'm imagining, so you can also export the straight code as you'd imagine.
Hmm.
And I'd imagine this is what most visionOS developers are doing. Here's kind of what I think they do. They probably have Xcode open with Mac Virtual Display. Then they just export the code from Details Pro and copy that in Xcode. Then they can run some tests of that code maybe, and then they want to make some tweaks. They go back to Details Pro to do that and kind of do that. Is that the chain that you're thinking most people do?
Yeah, and you can also, so yes, and the thing I've been doing recently that is also a newer feature is you can do like instant live preview on multiple devices now. You actually couldn't do that before for even a single one, but I'll often be designing on like my iPad, and I'll be previewing it on like a physical iPhone on my desk, or I'll be doing some other version of that where like I'm designing on Mac OS in my Vision environment,
Right.
live previewing to a live Vision window next to it.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
Something, and it's just like it gets it's a little cumbersome, but that's just but I think it speaks to two things. One, SwiftUI was invented and created to be code that runs on multiple platforms. So Apple wants you to do that, to share a lot of code. And then also a lot of designers are responsible for multiple platforms. So it's like everyone's kind of in this headspace of what is this? This works on my iPad screen, but it's got to look a little different for this other one.
And as you're doing the preview stuff, is that live where it respects size classes? Like, can you resize the Vision OS window or iPad windows so it reacts to that?
100%, and it's only that only works because it is just Swift UI at the end of the day. So if you have a like a form or a list that has special behavior, um, that's all coming from the environment. And that just helps me sleep at night, honestly, because I know that, for example, if we get visionOS 3, 4, 5, the behaviors are all just going to be built in for Details Pro. Like there's nothing, I never have to play a cat and mouse game trying to keep up with that stuff.
Once you do your first pass with Details Pro, do you think most developers would do tweaks to that in Xcode for their SwiftUI code, or maybe they keep going back to Details Pro because they're not great at writing SwiftUI? So the whole purpose of your app is they don't need to learn SwiftUI; they can just use your app instead.
I think definitely. I'm sure that people used. They changed the code after. I think a funny thing, most developers will be wary of anything that generates code for them. And I think what I would say about Details Pro's generated SwiftUI code is that it is very vanilla. Like there's nothing magic about it. So I don't know if you'd ever, or it's hopefully very minimal and reduced. So I don't think you'd ever be annoyed by it because it's sort of only the essentials.
So you can read the code as a developer and understand it versus some of the tools out there. There's so much bloat in there that you can't understand how it's producing what it's producing.
Definitely. Something like, if anyone remembers, like Dreamweaver, that might be like a...
Oh, yeah. Rapid Weaver was my favorite way to create websites back in the day. I love that app. Yeah.
And so there's something where if there was code bloat, it didn't even matter because you were loving it and you were using
exactly.
it. But the other thing, so definitely people will want to, use the code, change it. I find myself honestly using it, using Details Pro SwiftUI code for something where I'm just being super lazy. And for example, you might have some dense part of a UI where there's like masking and there's gradients and there's all these things, and that's just a lot of stuff to write. So it's for something like that, I'm like, oh, I'll just throw it together in this, and I can, and the good news is you paste it into your Xcode project and you preview it there, and it looks the same. So, like you get to, you can verify it at all the different steps. You don't have to trust it for too long.
Yeah. And would you say most apps start with the UI, or do they start with the logic? Like, I'd imagine you'd need the UI first and then you program the logic against it, or I don't know.
That's a great question. I would actually say, so I bet it's the opposite.
Okay.
I bet a lot of people have ideas and they go, okay, I know what my app is going to do, but I'm not sure how it's going to look yet. And that reminds me of this other concept, which I think about all the time, which is that you got to design an experience from the beginning, not from the middle. And I always fall for this where I'm like, I know exactly how cool this app is going to be. There's going to be this screen and this is what it's going to have. But I haven't thought at all about how anyone gets to that point.
Right.
And whether that's easy to understand or, so. But yeah, but I bet a lot of developers know what they want the app to do.
Yeah. And then I was curious about this aspect of designing something here. Say I'm working on something in Discover, it'd be great to bring this screen from my other Details Pro project and that one. What's the process like for sharing assets between different projects you're working on in Details Pro?
Right now, it's super underdeveloped. It's like only copy paste, and I get a lot of feedback requesting something like symbols or something like anything like referencing, having, being able to reuse something live.
Like an asset library, almost like where let me save this screen into the asset library of Details Pro where I can bring that into the other projects in that way.
Mm-hmm. So that's totally something that is on my list to implement. I feel like I'm always juggling around in my head because I'll tell you my dream scenario. I would love to have something like that where let's say you design something that's going to be in multiple files, but then I'd really like to have, when you drop that in, a really clean way to override all of its, that's just like symbols. People are going to say that's all symbols are. But where it gets, I think, slightly more complicated for me is then I want to let people have that go through, because a lot of times what you'll design a screen that has buttons and you tap one of them, like a list of albums, and then you see the album page for that album. So in my dream scenario, the things that you changed on that one get passed into the second screen, and passing data is super normal for developers. it's not very common for designers, and that's sort of my next, like, moonshot goal of, not moonshot, but just like that's the next thing that I'm going to think about for like 6 months and hopefully add to the app.
Gotcha. Yeah. And then as you're designing like a music player, I noticed like the pause button. I'm trying to think, like in music apps, the buttons like transform as they're being like pause and play is the same button, right? How does that work in the design process? Like, yeah.
So Details Pro, there's no facility for that. Like it's more static.
Mm-hmm.
But an interesting thing about this is that Apple provided recently SF symbols that support animation.
Okay.
And it's actually really deep. So I haven't really put in support for that in Details Pro yet, but I think a good example is, like, let's say if you were gonna animate from, let's say there was like this is made up, but there was like an icon of a bike, and then there's an icon of a bike with like a spinning, recycle icon as a sub little thing in that. SF Symbols is smart enough to let you, when you animate from one to the other, it'll just bring in the additional element that's on the second bike instead of fading the whole thing out. So I guess the good news is if you design with Details Pro and use SF Symbols, you're set up to use that in Xcode. But
Gotcha.
But there's nothing fancy for that yet.
And then another thing I noticed is like the image gallery and the music player. It's got like the album artwork. I'd imagine that's just for prototyping, because the actual code, you're more so reading metadata than saving this one particular album in it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. So yeah, that's just something, a part of the prototyping stage, and at a certain point, you'll yank out that image asset.
Yeah, you'll yank that out, and there's a feature. One thing that I added that is actually similar to this idea of the asset library that you brought up, and was my version of this. There's a feature in Details Pro called Repeat, which is maps to SwiftUIs for each for doing loops. But I haven't seen that in other design tools as standard, where there's something where you don't have to declare some element as being a reusable symbol. You can simply take anything and have it repeat a bunch of times, and then you can change the metadata in each one. So that was something that I added because I felt like 90% of reusable designs, napkin math, are lists. There are like contiguous lists. So why don't I just make something for contiguous lists, and hopefully that'll be satisfying for a while.
Yeah.
And but you would need your metadata in your Xcode app to come from somewhere for that.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense. And then as far as different like API calls, I noticed like the subscription version of Details Pro, you're able to work with the maps stuff to design in maps. Are there any other like limitations that you can't currently design in there that you hope to address in the future?
Oh, definitely. Thank you for that question. Swift Charts is one.
Okay. Yeah.
That I get a lot of feedback about. And I'm personally just scared about how I'm going to let people add data in for the charts.
Yeah, right.
I feel like any good chart has like good data.
Mm-hmm.
Swift Charts is one. And then is there anything else? Nothing that comes to mind. The map support is pretty basic, and I would love to add support for much more like custom pins and things, and also navigation.
Yeah.
Like, or not navigation in terms of steps, but I believe Apple calls them like any blue line on a map is called a polyline. So that would be cool to be able to put in. And the only other thing that is coming up right now is I'm going to add support for the watch and the Apple TV as preview destinations, which is super funny because I know people are going to say those aren't that necessary, but
the
they're kind of just
is. I want to
watch,
like if I'm designing a watch app, I got my Ultra and like the series watch and the rounded corners, that look way different.
Totally. And the last watchOS 10 design cycle was crazy, adding like all the new, so many apps look amazing now.
Yeah.
So for that, you'll just essentially, it'll be there will be no editing app on the watch. It'll simply be, you can preview on the watch. And the good news is that, again, is just something that takes the environment, kind of takes over, and fonts look a certain way. tab views look a certain way, and that's the beauty of Details Pro and SwiftUI is, it's more code than just static imagery, so it's kind of fun to design with.
What's the discovery process like so your iPad can see the watch?
It's the same. So it's the same between all of them, the way that it is right now. And there's something provided by Apple called okay. A lot of people, I'm sure, are familiar with the word bonjour.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
In Apple,
the old days.
Apple,
yep.
Yeah, and so if I understand the tech stack correctly, there's something. It's actually relatively simple. I think I set it up in a day. Just the idea of seeing each other. There's a framework in the iOS, macOS, everything called multi-peer connectivity, which I think makes Bonjour easy to use.
Okay.
I don't know if it's hard to use, but I think that's the low-level thing. And so all I have to do in the development world is say, I'm looking for other devices that are part of this service, and they pop up. And the other nice thing is the way the live preview works is the data is going, the file that you're designing is going directly from device to device, as opposed to syncing through a cloud or something. So changes are really fast because I don't have to really wait around for CloudKit to sync or resync or anything like that.
Yeah, and you just have to make sure your watch is awake and doesn't fall asleep on you as you're working.
Yeah.
And then, the Apple TV, that'll be interesting as well.
Yeah, that was one I was really excited about. I feel like the Apple TV has turned a little bit more into primarily, I mean, there isn't a sea of apps that we use that are all sorts of different purposes.
Right.
On the
It's
Apple
even,
TV.
The Vision Pro people make fun of because the App Store is kind of pathetic, but the Apple TV seems to be definitely on the decay as far as it used to have this vibrant ecosystem. Now it's just the streamer apps mainly.
Yes.
Some games, and a lot of games are being pulled off of the App Store.
When I got one of the developer kits back then, because they offered a developer kit for the new Apple TV, and I designed a weather app. I designed a lookbook app for one of my friend's businesses that was like a clothing brand. And so that I was imagining a future where we'd shop.
Absolutely, yeah. Where's
like
the Amazon app for Apple TV? Yeah,
totally. I guess it didn't hit that way, but
no.
But still cool. It's just cool, I think, as a developer, just to see, like that. I mean, I don't want to pretend like I think most developers will have no need to preview on Apple TV,
right?
But someone who does will be really happy that they're not just faking it in the iPad app anymore.
Yeah, I had this in the original days. I had this vision of the future. It's like, it's like the desktop iOS device, the Apple TV, and we'll be able to hook up trackpads and keyboards to it. It'll become this like low cost Mac Mini alternative kind of for iOS, and never became that. No mouse support or anything. Apple didn't want that, I guess. Yeah.
No, but I did just set up. My wife and I are expecting a baby in a month, and we just set up a HomeKit camera, and which I thought I looked for a HomeKit camera. I don't know if have you ever tried the HomeKit security cameras on tvOS?
I have not. I have the Apple TV, but I don't use Apple TV that much. Like, yeah.
I'll just say real quick, the design is incredible because you're watching something, you can pull up a picture-in-picture of your camera, and of course that you can see it. It moves the subtitles over automatically, so they're not intersecting. And then when you're watching the security camera of a certain room, the controls for other lights in that room all appear at the bottom of the screen.
That is neat.
So a lot of thoughts got into that.
Here's the one HomeKit camera I have. It's the Neatmo one. It's a HomeKit camera. Because there's not many out there. It's like, what's a form? This seemed like a form factor that was pretty appropriate for. We use it downstairs to watch our cat during the day. But I was initially going to use it as a baby camera, but I ended up just doing a low tech solution with the RF whatever radio things. It's got Ethernet jack and stuff on it too. It's one.
You got to pull it up on the TV sometime, see how that looks.
Yeah, for sure. But it's fun watching our cat down here. HomeKit cameras. I wish there were many more form factors and options than there are. It's kind of a shame. And like, why isn't there a baby monitoring HomeKit camera option. Like that's not even like that should be a product category for sure.
Totally. I think on the rumors front, there's the rumors of, some sort of mixes of HomePods and screens
Right.
and Apple TVs and cameras and
Yeah, it's
stuff.
$1,000 kitchen
What
device.
Whatever that is, that's gonna be my dream device because I feel like I'm always looking at my HomePod, wishing it had a screen, or looking at some, like I'm super down for more home tech goodies, alarm clocks, like bring it on.
For sure. I'm guessing you did not get Nintendo's alarm clock.
No, oh no, but I was excited that someone was making a beautiful alarm clock. Did you get it?
I did get it.
Is it super nice? Would you say?
It's joyful. It's designed. Like I
Yeah.
love the round, like in the knob and everything. I wish the screen was better quality. Like it's a square screen inside of a circular window. So I wish they, upped the screen a bit as far as like.
It's not masked to the edges.
No,
Yeah.
I wish like if they wanted to make it a little bit better, make it OLED so the blacks just disappeared behind, but it doesn't. But you don't really notice that in most uses. And so I impulse bought an alarm clock because it's just such a like who's innovating the alarm clocks? You're using a motion sensor and all this crazy stuff and different.
And you get Hyrule sounds, right?
You
Like
do.
Mario sounds.
And I was
Yeah.
most excited about Pikmin because that seems like a perfect kind of.
Oh,
But I'm using it just mainly as a clock in that room because I use my Apple Watch to wake up right now. But maybe when my family is out of town, I'll use it to wake up. It'll be a delightful experience. We'll see.
I feel like this is a prime vote with your wallet situation, right? You want them to know, I love this. Make more.
Yeah,
please.
innovating in the alarm clock space is just a wild thing, and it's like very Nintendo for them to do this. And maybe
Super
one
random.
day my kid will use that as their alarm clock. Yeah, because it definitely works better as alarm clock if just one person in the room kind of thing.
Yeah. My dad passed this down to me, my Nintendo alarm clock.
Yes, exactly. 'Cause the other thing going through my head, this is such a tangent, but it's fine, is that Nintendo, I've got the Labo stuff that got discontinued. Is this going to get discontinued in a year and miss out on it? So I don't want to miss out on it.
Gotta grab it.
Yeah. So Nintendo's weird. They just might make it for a year or two. You never know.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. It's a wild thing. During the setup process, I at first wasn't sure if you could use it without setting an alarm because it really wants you to set an alarm time. But yeah, after you're done through the setup, you can say turn the alarm off, which is great.
Yeah, just be a clock.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's super cool, and I love changing the different characters, and I'm excited when Animal Crossing comes to it. It's a fun little thing.
I gotta check this out.
Gadget. Yeah, it's a fun little thing. Yeah, and I really want to turn on the evening sounds and the hourly chimes because that seems delightful. But I'm gonna wait for a bit until I'm home alone to test that stuff out.
Totally.
Oh gosh. But yeah, Apple make an alarm clock. That'd be fun. I don't know. Like it could be a HomePod combined as a.
Yeah, I just feel like nothing would. My gripe with alarm clocks is always that the text doesn't look beautiful.
Right.
Like there's still a lot of that the LED with the different shapes, and so I would just kill for like a beautiful. And I mean, I guess standby is that for me right now. I use standby, and I'm like, wow, that looks gorgeous.
And imagine if Apple did it, there could be a button on it to like play soothing sounds at night kind of thing. Like they could have a pretty cool like HomePod alarm. Alarmo.
Totally.
Yeah. And they could use motion sensing too if they wanted to, but they probably would realize that would only work for single occupancy rooms, and maybe, I don't know if they'd go down that path.
I know, yeah. How do you only wake up one person?
Exactly, yeah. Wrapping up Details Pro. Just a couple last things here.
Yeah.
So it's free to download and get started with. What kind of limitations do you run into eventually, and what does the pricing look like at that point?
So I've tweaked this a lot over the years. Really happy with where it is now. So you get the limitations are a lot of the newer prototyping features are not included in the free version. So you can do everything that has been in the app for 3 years now, almost 4, for free. But if you want to do navigation, sheets, maps, which you shouldn't have to do for most things anyway, because you're mostly designing little pieces, that is in the premium version. And that is $299 a month or $29.99 a year. And in the past, there used to be a file limit. That's gone. And looking into the future, I'm going to be adding a bunch of templates, a bunch more free ones, and also some that are only available premium. But my hope, like my philosophy with this is, and with the apps that I make with my partner for Fujifilm stuff, I always want someone to be able to try it now, but also try it again in a year and like see the improvement and then want to pay for it. So my hope is that someone downloads it and realizes like, okay, I can definitely figure out if I like it for free. And then if I want to pay for it, it's also not some like one-way door or something crazy. So, you know what I mean? I'm like, I would love for you to buy it at some point.
Totally. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And then anything we didn't cover about the app that you'd like to share? I'm not a developer, so I'm not sure what, if anything, I missed.
I think, no, thank you for asking. I think we covered everything. My last thought about it would maybe just be to encourage people to try it, even if they are not a developer or a designer, because it can simply be fun to go face to face with. I always love calling them by name, like vertical stacks, text, image. Like it's so fun to just, for me, I actually get lost in just that. Like how are you going to put text on top of text? What fonts, what colors, what sizes, what spacing? So you can do that for free, and you can also just play around with that. So I feel like my hope for people would be, even though app development gets complicated pretty quickly, designing with SwiftUI and just making something visual is not that.
Very cool. And yeah, play around with it, and maybe use, if you're not a developer, you could use ChatGPT to write a really weird basic app
totally
to pique your interest. Yeah.
Yeah. And even if you don't have a Vision Pro, obviously this works great on iPhone, iPad. And then if you one day get a Vision device, all those designs can just immediately be rendered on Vision. So that's a cool thing.
Very cool. Yeah. I was just imagining designing in fully immersive, or like, how do developers go about designing the fully immersive experiences in their visionOS apps? Because this is mainly for the flat visionOS apps.
Yeah,
This is the fully
definitely
immersive stuff. Yeah,
that's got to be like the territory of like.
That's not SwiftUI at that point, right? You're OpenGL.
No, yeah. You're in something
Unity.
There's exactly. I was say there's hooks into SwiftUI, but then you're in Unity, Unreal,
right?
Yeah, and there's not yet something. I haven't used anything that repeatedly that is a big immersive environment app, but that I'm sure is got to be the next frontier of this stuff,
right?
Like games and
yeah. Another question. If you don't have a keyboard or trackpad, did you design DetailsPro in a way that is friendly in that way, or is it you probably should have a keyboard or trackpad as a developer?
It's I would say so. Definitely everything I said earlier applies with like wanting to have a keyboard and trackpad.
Yeah.
There are two features that are easy though that make this a little easier. One, I have a numpad, which I've always had for the iPhone, iPad, just to like, and it's great. It's besides just being a numpad, it's got plus and minus buttons based on what you're changing. So for changing padding, there's different quick increments than fonts or whatever. So that's pretty good. And then the other thing that's a feature that's coming out in a future update that I almost put out like a year ago, and then I wasn't sure if it was good, and I recently was missing it. There's a feature coming out called Text Library, which basically a lot of designers, you'd be surprised, work on the same things all the time. Like if you work at some company, it's a delivery app or a music, whatever, you're kind of in the same world at all times. So I've got a feature now where it's going to be whenever you're trying to put in text, you can click this little library icon and it'll pull up all of the text you've ever written on any of your designs. Not in some creepy recordy way. It's just looking at your other files, and it divides
and sort by frequency kind of thing.
It divides them up into acronyms, a few words, sentences, So hopefully, if let's say you type Dua Lipa for work because you work on a music thing, Details Pro doesn't make you type it a million times.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So that kind of helps.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very nice. Yeah. And then anything else as far as updates in the works?
No, I feel like I covered it. Big things are patching a bunch of bugs that I recently introduced with the prototyping stuff, which got a lot more interesting. And then I think my next year goal is to just fill it up with a ton of beautiful templates because I feel a little behind on templates in the app. And from my analytics, I can see that that's people's favorite thing. So yeah, hopefully next year there's just like so many templates you can't even believe it.
Awesome. Can't wait to see how it develops. And I know there's the community feature, and it'd be cool if community members could also donate to something like that. I don't know how that would go as far as getting too cluttered, though.
Yeah, no, right now people, like, you can make a community profile and post on there. But yeah, but I think over time, it's like anything, it's turned into most people just want to download stuff. So it's only the rare creator that wants to create on there.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. So where can people follow you online and learn more about Details Pro?
I'm fairly active on X and Mastodon at my name, just Sahand Nayebaziz, Nay. And Details Pro, same thing. I post a lot on those sites. I've got a blog, sahandnayebaziz.org. And yeah, and I make a lot of YouTube tutorials. So
sweet.
Any way that you prefer.
Cool. I will link to those in the show notes. And yeah, thanks again for your time. It's been great chatting about Details Pro and all our fun little tangents today.
Yeah, dude, thanks for having me. I feel like it was mostly tangents, so I hope people enjoyed that. And yeah, thanks for having me on here.
Well, that's a discussion with Sahand all about Details Pro. My thanks again to him for his time recording. My thanks to you for your time and attention tuning in. As a reminder, you can support this podcast over visionpros.fm/Patreon or by subscribing in Apple Podcasts. With that, I'll talk with everyone again real soon.